mysteries of creation are there.
In the sky.
Up in the sky. The moon and the planets are there. And new hopes for knowledge and peace are there.
Hello, hello. What's up, my man? I say, go ahead and say something. Let me see if I can hear you. No, can't. Let me put on my Bluetooth here. I gotta put these speakers on. I still can't hear you. Hey there.
Any word?
Yeah, man, I got you now.
Oh, that's better.
I can hear you.
All right.
Let me see if I can try out these headphones here.
All right, give me 1 second.
Sorry, just dialing in.
All right.
Yo, man, it's good to see you.
It is. I think the last time we caught up was over at Deb's. Maybe.
Yep.
It's probably about right. Yeah, man. Things are going all right.
Cool. Awesome. Great. Well, I appreciate your willingness, your excitement, enthusiasm.
Well, certainly happy to help and happy to be able to learn. I've been trying to brush up on my my Richard Tarnas.
Oh, cool.
I've been reading that recommendation.
Awesome.
And whatnot.
Cosmos and Psyche, or
yeah.
Okay, cool, great. Yeah, well, this is, I mean, it's a brave soul to be having a reading done in public, and it basically goes about as deep as you're willing to go. So whatever you're willing to kind of just reveal about your life, is gonna dictate how deep we can go here. So my encouragement is just to cut loose and just kind of open yourself up, and you'll be super well taken care of.
Well, before I opened my laptop out, I tried to sit down and clear my energy, and my one intention really was to be as open and honest as was appropriate, and to make this as effective as possible for you and for me and for those who are here to learn.
Awesome, man. You are the perfect man for the job. So welcome, everybody. I'm James Moran. I'm an archetypal astrologer. We have here with us today Justin Schramm. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
That's right.
Who is the brave volunteer to join us and talk about his life and have us look at his birth chart and his transit chart as a tool for clarity. So looking at the charts is basically, it's almost like if you were doing something very important, you would want to have the most information that you could have about that thing. Like if you were going to go on a trip, you would want to have a map and know the route. If you were going to buy some type of appliance or some type of like kind of product, you would want a user's manual that helps you understand how to use it. And so that's what the birth chart and the transit charts do. They give clarity, which is so helpful. And also they give a sense of really being supported by the universe, or, you know, by grace or God or whatever word you want to use, because the chart is just a pictogram of the sky that when you were born. And so in a way, it's like that the outermost world is kind of connecting with us and revealing to us that it can show us something that's so important to our interior unfolding. And so that in and of itself can provoke great faith and just a sense of awe, you know, that the kind of the universe itself is, as our life unfolds and unrolls like a carpet, like a red carpet before us, you know, the person who the orchestrating powers of that whole unfolding have written, you know, the map to your life on that unfolding carpet, kind of like step here, check this out, watch out over here, you know, piso mojado, so, you know what I mean? Like caution. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We are going to dive into the charts, and I encourage you to look at this almost as like story time, because in archetypal astrology, what we do is we have the birth chart. We look at the birth chart with a certain approach, which I will describe, because there's many different traditions of astrology, and there's many different components to a birth chart, and the different traditions of astrology kind of cluster and choose different components of that birth chart to look at. And in archetypal astrology, we look at the planets and the alignments between the planets, whereas, you know, you can look at a lot of other stuff as well, but that's what we choose to look at. It's almost like different schools of painting use different, you know, tend to use different colors or something, even though there's one full set that everybody pulls from. There's stylistic differences. And so if any of this intrigues you, I'm going to be teaching a course coming up starting next week. It's a 9-week course, which will teach you how to do what we are doing. And not only that, the course itself is going to be a period of kind of accelerated deepening and growth in your life, in your own psychospiritual unfolding red carpet, because you'll be able to actually see the communications of the universe, of the divine with you about your life. And so get ready for some awe and just some beautiful marveling at yourself, at others. It's a real, very intimate connection to the divine orchestration of life and just the beauty, really honestly, just the beauty of existence and the beauty of the human spirit. So I welcome you all to join us in that course that's coming up. That being said, let's dive on in. So again, I encourage you to look at this as story time, but story time that is not so much, you know, there's story time that's like, you know, watching, you know, like reading Peter Pan or watching a Marvel movie or something like that, which is cool. It's archetypal. But this is story time that's about a real person's life. And when we look at the charts, we can see the archetypal elements that compose all of our lives. It kind of, it distills down the human life into the basic archetypal characteristics that we all have. It's almost like the ingredients, the same basic ingredients that are in all recipes. They're just in different amounts and added at different times. And so it's both a story time because it's a story of kind of the human spirit, the development, the evolution of the human spirit, but it's also story time in the sense that it's a real person's life. And then in another sense that it's the human life. It's got the same archetypal dynamics underlying it that all of us do. So, you know, grab your favorite, you know, beverage or treat or whatever, and pull on up to the fire and let's dive on in. So again, Justin, thank you so much for being here. And And yeah, I just really appreciate your kind of just your attitude. You know, you got a real kind of spiritual adventure attitude. So what we have before us is what's called the birth chart. And I pulled up two charts. So the birth chart, we got August 4th, 1982, 7:20 a.m. in Alexandria, Virginia. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, so the birth chart is basically a pictogram of the sky when you were born. So it looks, you know, if you've never seen a birth chart before, it may be hard to parse out what it is because there's not a lot of English letters there. It's all symbols, glyphs. But it's basically a representation of the sky when Justin was born. He would be being born in the center in Alexandria, Virginia. And over here where it says AC, that's actually the eastern horizon. That's the indicator of the eastern horizon. Opposite that is the indicator of the western horizon. And so it's when all the planets rise from roughly the same place in the east and they set from the same place in the west. So for instance, Justin was born at 7:20 a.m. So this glyph right here represents the sun, and the sun had risen over the eastern horizon. So this wheel had like click, click, click turned and brought the sun over the eastern horizon. And so Mercury was right on the eastern horizon. The sun had risen over the eastern horizon. Venus was a little higher in the sky. And you can always see when I hover on something, the name up here in the upper left. And so these glyphs around the edges, these symbols, are the symbols for the planets, the celestial bodies. And you can see the name up here when I hover over it. You know, we've got Pluto, Saturn, Mars, Jupiter, etc. The moon, obvious. And then these divisions of the circle are what are called the signs of the zodiac, these 12 equal divisions of the sky. And at any point in time, we can always see one half of the sky. Like for instance, over where I am in the Washington, DC area, it's getting towards sunset. So the sun would be setting over here in the west, and that's in that direction. And then we can see one arc of the sky between the western horizon and the eastern horizon. But there's always a part of the sky that's invisible to us. It's the underside of the sky, the part that is the other half of the world. You know, when it's nighttime for us, the sun has gone down and it's daytime for somebody on the other side. And so that part of the sky that we can't see is beneath the eastern and western horizon. So it's the part of the sky that's under here. And so the moon had set, for instance, when Justin was born. It was just below the horizon. So here we are. We've got the birth chart. The birth chart, now that we understand what the pictogram represents, symbolically what it represents is the nature of the individual and also the life of the individual. And this is where astrology takes a leap beyond our current paradigm of worldview, because the astrological birth chart describes the life of the individual as a story, which means it's not limited to Justin's body. Like the life that is his is not just what's going on inside his body. It's also the people that he meets, the situations that transpire, the events that transpire, just like a story. You know, if you read a story, the story, the main character in the story, their life would be all the characters in the story. It would be the whole unfolding story itself. And so the birth chart is kind of like a map to that story, to the nature of the individual. It definitely describes the nature of the inner space of the individual. It also describes the unfolding landscape of the story of their life, because there isn't really a boundary between the two. And so archetypal astrology, when we look at the planets and the angles between the planets in archetypal astrology, the reason why we do that is because archetypal astrology is a school of astrology that developed out of the research into the clinical research into the healing potential of psychedelic assisted therapy. And researchers were actually looking for a tool that could help them anticipate the type of subconscious material that would come up when somebody is in this deep therapeutic healing process using psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. And they couldn't find a tool in the Western psychological toolkit. And somebody suggested astrology. They were hesitant because they're already working really kind of far afield from the mainstream, but they tried it anyways. And they found that that's the tool that can help them anticipate. And they found that it was most helpful by just looking at the planets, you know, like the planets and all these lines in the center. The lines show the angular relationships or alignments between the planets. Because their interest was mapping the psychospiritual development of the person, the psychospiritual evolution of the person, the psychospiritual growth process of that person. And astrology can be used in many ways, but using it in that way, they found looking at the planets was the most helpful. It created the most comprehensive portrait, planets and the alignments of the planets, for helping somebody in that way, helping them understand themselves, know thyself. Okay, so this is the birth chart here. This is, again, helps us understand the whole of the life, the story of the life, the nature of the individual, with a specific emphasis on the psycho-spiritual evolution of the individual, and the story of the life as being a play of kind of psycho-spiritual evolution, psycho-spiritual growth. And so we have another chart here called the transit chart. And the transit chart is, we took the birth chart, we put it in the center, and then in a wider concentric circle, we put where the planets are at a certain point of time. So for us right now, we have where the planets are now, because that's going to give us roughly a sense of now through the next year, because most people, that's what they're interested in looking at. But you can pull up a transit chart for something that happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 2 years in the future, any period of time. It gives you a window, it gives a sense of where you are at. The birth chart is a larger arc of the psychospiritual unfolding of the individual. The transit chart gives a more narrow window of time. Where are they on that larger arc? What are they specifically having to navigate in that section of the larger arc? What are the specific themes for them to navigate? And it's just so helpful. It's so helpful to know, to understand. So many times in my life, I use the transit analysis all the time. And so many times in my life, something like really puzzling happens. And, I might not have it figured out, even though I know the transits, I don't have it figured out, but at least I have a hint of what's going on. And I just think to myself, wow, I would be really lost if I didn't have this, because life can really throw some curveballs. But when when we look at the transit chart, we can see, like, usually at the beginning of a large transit, we might not have figured it out. We might not have it dialed in, but we know the characters involved. We know the archetypes involved, the symbolism involved. And so we get a sense, we can kind of suss it out. We kind of say, okay, I can kind of see what's going on. Life is asking this of me, life is asking that of me. I don't quite have it figured out yet, but I know a little bit of the rhythm and the beat and the timeline. I know it's going to work out. I know the general characters involved. And so that's how a transit chart can be helpful. So with that preamble, that has helped us to just get a general foothold on archetypal astrology as a practice. We're going to start getting into Justin's life, and we're going to do so in a way that actually allows us to take breaks, like periodic breaks, to check in with the audience. Like, for instance, right now, we're going to just take a break before we dive into Justin's life and just say hi to the audience and see if you guys have any questions before we dive in here. Anybody out there have any questions? Wonderful audience. Thank you for being here. We good? We good? All right. Cool. All right. So here we go. Justin, we would love to know about your life, and particularly, why don't we start with kind of like where you're at right now in your life, like where you're at right now in your life. What are some themes that you're experiencing right now in your life, and where would you like to go in your life in the immediate future?
I guess isn't that the question? It's a super interesting time for me. I'm approaching 40 faster than I want to, and Yeah, I'm in the middle of looking for a career change.
Mhm.
In the past, you know, 4 or 5 years, a bump after spiritual bump. You know, um, I've uh, I've always been, you know, I meditated for the first time when I was 20 and found there to be truth beyond this world, um, and and um, you know, so all we, you know, had a you know, a belief in the beyond and the like, but as you know, as I as I grew, you know, I grew into in my 20s, I grew into um, drug problems, and I, you know, kind of veered away from all of that, and got out of all of that in my 30s, and you know, and kind of had a re spiritual awakening.
Mhm.
And You know, psychedelics were a you know, a big had a big influence in that, and you know, getting back to meditation and astral travel and things like that. And so now, so you know, now in the you know, I kind of thought, well, you know, I've kind of hit the big hurdles. You know, I got over, you know, my, you know, my big hurdle, which was, you know, drugs at the time, and you know, thought I had kind of had it made in the shade, so to speak. Um, you know, come to find out that, you know, there's you know, it's not all still easy, uh, but you know, and um, have you know, continue to uh, have be more in touch with you know, my you know, my higher self, and you know, who's constantly telling me to do things I don't want to do, but that are for the better. So you know, I'm looking to, you know, do something, you know, do something work wise that that you know, I can give back a little more. Uh, I'm looking to let go of looking to let go of, you know, the rest of you know, uh, uh, you know, they being, you know, the guide collective is constantly on me to, you know, give up nicotine and drink less, and you know, things like that. So you know, I'm trying to improve myself bit by bit, you know, while trying to find work that can give back in a larger way. And
What's your current like career path, and what are some?
so you know, I had worked in the food and restaurant business for a long time. In the last 5 years or so, I've been a sales director for we're like a regional pet care company, but I'm trying to break out of the sales. You know, I don't want to sell things to people anymore. I'd rather help somebody get somewhere than sell them something.
Right.
I mean,
Do you have like kind of ideas of directions that you'd like to go, or are you just open to what comes your way?
you know, I'm open to what comes. I'm open to what comes my way. Uh, I'm you know, very open. Um, I'm very open to what comes my way. You know, I've been looking into you know, environmental work and things like that. You know, however, my background doesn't necessarily, you know, I got a degree in something completely unrelated, and then, you know, worked in a you know, this other field, you know, and you know, food and beverage and in the sales industry. So there's not a lot of experience in that, but you know, I'm you know, I'm open to, you know, anything really.
Okay, cool. Well, what was the degree in?
The degree was in criminal justice.
Criminal justice. Okay. Cool. Well, with that in mind, would you mind if we kind of took it back, like back into your life and got to know
Sure.
kind of the story of Justin?
Sure.
Okay, so we have here your birth chart. So 1982, August 4th, you're born. So, do you know anything about your birth, like your actual physical birth, what it was like?
My mother's always told me I came out smiling. She said I didn't make any sound. They had to slap me before I was willing to cry.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay, cool. Um, and then what type of atmosphere were you born into? What type of family atmosphere, family dynamic were you born into?
Yeah, I think I had a pretty pretty positive childhood. My um, my mother was as loving as anyone could be. I've only developed a closer relationship with my father as the years have gone on. Um, he was a little rough around the edges, I guess, when I was a kid, but is a super sweetheart these days. But it was it was I think it was pretty regular going.
Mhm. Okay. Like what so you had a relationship with your mother and she was loving.
Mhm.
Um, and your father was rough around the edges. What like in what way was he rough?
Well, he cared, but he was wrapped up in his career and his work, and um, was wasn't around. And then when he traveled a lot for work, and when he would come back around, there might have been focus on what have you done wrong, less than what's been right. But I don't, not to paint him in too negative a light.
Yeah,
He was a good, caring guy on the whole.
right. Okay, cool. And then the atmosphere in the home, like did you have siblings and or
I
anything?
did. I had a sister who was younger. Both my parents were married before, so they had older kids in their teens. 15 years older than I. But so I had a younger sister, 3 years, who was 3 years younger. Um, and our relationship was always great. Despite coming out as a smiling baby, I probably I don't know, there was probably some sadness that always loomed, some sort of depression that was built in. I feel like throughout my life,
Hmm. Hmm. Okay,
but not as a result, I don't think, of any abuse or anything like that.
sure, sure. Yeah. And so you're born into this family atmosphere. You have a younger sister, you have older siblings that are like, it sounds like maybe significantly older.
Significantly older, yeah. We were never, there was never like a closeness where they'd have much effect on anything that was happening in my world.
Right. And and then how did your parents get along with each other?
They uh you know they had their ups and downs. I think my uh it could just be that my father was a snorer, but I have a feeling there was more to it than that. They slept in different bedrooms
Mhm, mhm.
for most of the time. But I think because they had both been married before, they were determined to make their this marriage work. And
Yeah.
they're still together. There's roughly, but they're still together. Still rough for them.
Okay. Okay. And so you're there, you're growing up, you're in like childhood years. How was like the transition into go into school and just growing up in general and coming of age? How was that unfolding for you?
So I was talking to my mom kind of about this a few weeks ago, and she said that well, you fell into, you fell in, how did you put it, like you fell in with a bad crowd. And I said to her, I was like, since I was in middle school, I was the bad influence. I was the bad influence. It wasn't that, I was like this, I was like the little angel with the halo who got sucked in with the bad crowd. I was looking for trouble from the time I was young.
Mm-hmm.
For I don't know why. And it's strange because uh, um, people who got into the kind of trouble I eventually got into, there's oftentimes you hear about the abuse, there was this abuse or that abuse, or it was rough in this way or that way. And there wasn't any of that really, but it was like, I was on a path that was going to, lead me into trouble that I eventually had to get myself out of.
Okay. And so as you went on through like high school, was that when you got yourself out of it, or was it more like later?
There was ups and downs. I was, um, I started in with weed and stuff when I was in middle school, and then, um, and then, found that broke my mother's heart, which broke my heart, and kind of cleaned that up, act up for a while. And it was all right. In high school, and um, you know partied and whatnot. But it was all right. It probably, and then got bad again in my 20s, early 20s.
Okay. So you transition, you're in high school, and then you transition out of high school in your 20s, um, and encounter drugs and alcohol. And what were your 20s like? And also what was your how did how was the transition into like adulthood, in the sense of like differentiating from your family, beginning to design a career path? How did that take shape?
uh I think, I just like, I think I just, I wanted autonomy. I always wanted to be older than I was. I always wanted to be older. I could only wish for the opposite these days, but at the time, I was, wanted, from, wanted to hang out with the older kids since I was a kid, and then, uh, wanted to be off on my own as soon as I could in college. And even I finished college, but after a year, all I wanted to do was just be out and work. And
Hmm.
did a year doing that, and found that wasn't any fun either. Trying to support yourself at 19 with no education. So went back and finished school. But I didn't have, I wasn't driven by education. In retrospect, I'd pay way more attention in school and everything else. If this isn't my last go round, next incarnation, I fully intend to pay more attention in class.
Okay. Okay. I'm just going to answer. There's been a couple questions in the chat.
Sure.
They're asking about the charts.
Mhm.
And there's a question about, in this process, do you use transits and birth chart only? For the most part, yeah, as opposed to like progression. Sometimes maybe progressions, but there's just so much. Generally speaking, this is going to be about an hour and a half, but generally speaking, a one-on-one astrology reading for me, as I do it, usually lasts 2 hours, and just the birth chart and the transits just brings up just so much information. It's just 2 hours is like just enough to be able to cover a lot of it. And then there's another question: which house system is this? So the house system preset here is Placidus, but we won't be using that because we'll be using mostly the alignments of the planets to kind of illustrate or provide an illustration, a more clarifying illustration of the life. Though when I do use houses, I tend a little bit more towards a whole sign house system personally. So these houses here are Placidus, which we won't really be using. All right, so hopefully that answered everybody's questions. Okay, so Justin, you're in school and you're wishing, like retrospectively wishing you could pay attention a little bit more.
I wish I'd cared more. I wish I'd cared about it more.
Okay.
I wish I have a desire to learn now. I'm in a place now where, I just can't read enough. I just can't consume enough of that. But at the time, it just, it was just what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be in college.
Okay. And is that when you got the criminal justice degree?
Yes, that's I bounced around. I was a photography major. I tried psychology for a minute, and then just needed a degree basically, and had taken some criminal justice classes.
Okay. Okay. Was it interesting to you at all?
I mean, it served some purposes for me over the years, doing, learning how to not get in trouble for things I shouldn't be doing. But so it was interesting in that regard. I never really intended to. I never intended to use it. The classes were enough that like I'd go to them, but I knew I was never going to be a cop. I knew I wasn't going to work in the court building. But I had the credits and I needed to declare a major, and so I did.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So so we'll probably start getting into the charts here. Let's just explore a little further. So you graduate from college, you're in your 20s, you transition into your 30s. That's when you, if I'm not mistaken, experience meditation, steer clear of, are able to kind of extricate yourself from habits involving drugs. And yeah, would you be willing to elaborate a bit more on that transition?
Sure. The started using harder drugs in my mid to mid 20s or so.
Like what?
Started with coke, and then it moved into pills, opiates, lots of opiates, and eventually turned to heroin, which I have been clean of for nearly seven years now.
Mm-hmm.
So, it'll be 6 years.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so and then so that was in your mid to late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And then how did that unfold into your 30s in terms of, career path, also coming into meditation, coming into.
So the you know, I had the ability to do the meditation from when I was younger. That always came pretty easily, but wasn't doing any of that. You know, when you're using heroin, you pretty much just use heroin. That's you know, that's what your life is. Career wise. You know, I was at the time I was working, you know, in bars and restaurants. That was until the dope. I was able to maintain a job. I was able to maintain a job uh, up until the you know, maybe my early 30s, and then it got so bad, you know, that I was basically selling drugs to support a habit most of the time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And how did that transition? What was the transition point into getting free of that?
Yeah, you know, uh, it's a you know, you get to a point where, or at least for me, and I think for most people who really do, who get over it, you get to a point where you either, you know, you either let it, you know, it's going to kill you, um, or you know, or you get over it. And I got to a point where, you know, I had skirted that edge for a real long time, and I finally, you know, I had exhausted every resource, and
Yeah.
was as unhappy as one could be, and you know, was either ready to die or to live. And it wasn't an easy, you know, it wasn't an easy choice to make.
Wow. Wow.
But I'm glad you know, I'm glad I chose the latter.
As are we all. You've been getting some kudos in the chat, some recognitions of your achievement.
Thank you.
So you how like what the transition of stopping using and also meditation helped me have a kind of play by play. Like was meditation a key part of stopping, or was that just part of the
So uh, the 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 meditation, I'm trying to think, like, when, you know, when that really came back around. That, you know, once I had been clean for about a year. Hey, could you get me my chart, the charger for the laptop? It's like, it's dying. Yeah, thank you. Um, yeah. So um, once I got clean, that was when it started. I also, another important bit, and I got off the drugs, and I knew I needed something in my life. At which point I took up skydiving, and that was instrumental as well.
Mm-hmm.
In sorry, my laptop's about to die. So the skydiving came in once, you know, I had been clean for a couple of months. I had gotten the drugs out of my system, and then, you know, needed something to replace that. The skydiving gave me a purpose and something to look forward to, something to be good at.
Wow.
And with it came clarity, and with the clarity, and drive and love of something else, that's when the meditation kicked back in. You know, I found a whole new community of people, and you know, it gave me something to live for. I was happy again.
Wow, that's
And
amazing, man.
yeah,
That's your
so
that's your Facebook profile picture.
it is.
It looks like you're on a snowboard in the middle of the sky or something like that. I mean, it's kind of hard to see because it's small, but
Yeah. No, I had that's that one's not sky surfing. I haven't gotten into the sky surfing quite yet, but yeah, at this point, I've got you know, 300 and some odd jumps over the course of the last you know, 5 or 6 years, and you know, there's a community there of people that is just incredible. You know, found you know, found psychedelics there. I had done some psychedelics in the you know, over the years, but without any real purpose or intention, and you know, was you know, learned what LSD as a tool can do for you, and you know, it's made a big difference in opening me up, and that and you know, there've been like these spiritual hurdles that I've hit, you know, as you know, over the years, and you know, you know, third eye openings, and then as the rest of your energy system opens up, uh, you know, you're able to channel this other information without them, you know, without that. So
yeah, without psychedelics, I mean.
yeah.
Yeah, help me understand you mentioned astral projection and guides, and help me understand
Uh,
perspective on those.
sure. So I mean, the astral projection has you know, there've been some, you know, there've been some interesting ones, but full, you know, they're full out of body experiences, um, you know, with, again, the without the use of the tool, you know, trips to other planets, and meetings with beings, interdimensional beings, and you know, I've always had a, you know, a relationship with, you know, you know, we didn't grow up we didn't grow up in a particularly religious family. I grew up reading Sylvia Browne and Brian Weiss, and you know, that was kind of our that was kind of our thing. So I always had a you know, a knowledge of guides being present, and like, you know, I tend to think it's mostly you know, all higher self connection at this point. At least that's what I'm in touch with, and an aspect of the self outside of myself who is at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
But yeah, uh, you know, with the, you know, just the with the intention to kind of do it. I knew it was possible, and started you know, working on that, and you know, now and also you know, now it's kind of a lot more like I'll do like you know, it's almost like a lot of remote viewing with the occasional out of the body trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes with Zoom, the voice gets distorted. I don't know if anybody else saw this, but he was like, it's something outside of me, but yet me. But when you said it, the Zoom just decided to get distorted for a second. It was like something outside of me, but also me.
Sorry, hopefully this is a little better.
No, it's good. Um, So
Or maybe that's them messing with the electronics.
yeah, it was definitely a little bit electronic. I don't know if anybody heard that. If you did, pop it in the chat. Maybe it'll be in the recording. But I was on a panel talk one time, and this astrologer was like, we were talking about, it was like 2020 pandemic and stuff. And this astrologer was like, you know what, we're gonna be okay. And just right when she said that, the thing got distorted, and it was like, okay. And everybody was like, whoa, okay, I guess we're gonna be okay. Okay, so great. Let's dive into the chart, shall we? Okay. So we're, again, like archetypal astrology. I know a lot of folks are viewing from, different traditions. So we're really going to be looking at the positions of the planets as they give a portrait. And the more we get kind of facility in this, we can actually look at a chart like this and actually have it look literally like a portrait or a storyline of the life that we're witnessing, that we're privy to, that we're hearing. So I think today we might actually bring in a number of different characteristics. Sometimes I know there was an earlier question about just using the birth chart and the transits in a reading. And for instance, sometimes when I give a full reading, I can't even bring in all the aspects in the chart because there's not enough time. So I got to kind of pick and choose which are the most relevant and kind of salient at that time. And so here we're actually going to try to fit in a bunch. So just because it seems like the right thing to do from listening to the story of Justin's life. So looking at the birth chart, we have actually what is called a T-square. Well, just just to back up a little bit, one of the reasons that I use this website is because it color codes what are called the angles, which is the alignments between the planets. And it color codes them in such a way that what are called the hard angles or hard aspects in the astrological lingo are red, and the soft aspects are in blue. And generally speaking, hard angles, hard aspects, hard alignments are alignments between planets in which the archetypal symbolism of the planet aligns in such a way that there's tension. There's tension there between them. And that tension is, in a life, it shows up as the need to kind of reconcile something. Like we come into life and there's some tension in our life, and we have to kind of figure it out. We have to reconcile these energies that are seemingly at odds or intense aspect or something like that, as opposed to the soft angles in blue, which is like when we come into life and these areas of our life are kind of, they just flow a little bit more smoothly, almost like we kind of sanded out the rough edges before we got here or something. They just kind of flow smoothly. And like everybody has a friend who is doing really good in this area of life while we're struggling in that area, but we're doing really good in this area while they're struggling in that area. Things like that can be indicative of hard and soft angles. And the soft angles are nice because it shows, kind of, it's like, it shows the ease, the areas of life where things kind of flow with ease. The challenge, though, with the soft angles is they're not necessarily impetus for growth and change as much there. Whereas with the hard angles, they're hard. They're challenging. The challenge of the hard angles is they're challenging. They're in our face. They're kind of demanding us to try to figure it out. But the benefit there is that it spurs, it catalyzes growth, change. Like, we got to figure it out. We got to adapt, be dynamic, try to reconcile things. And so looking at this chart in that way, we can see the hard aspects, we can see the soft aspects. And actually some of them are not showing up just because of the way this website's calibrated. And I think the first one I'm going to jump into is actually not showing up because of what's called the orbs are a little too wide. The orb is like when you have a 90-degree angle, which is this red angle right here, the orb is a little bit of wiggle room. It doesn't have to be exactly 90 degrees. Like this is about 6 degrees off. So there's an orb, it can still be within 6 or 8 degrees before you lose the tension of that alignment. So for instance, Uranus is here. So Justin was born with Mercury on the ascendant. So right there, Mercury's on the ascendant. Also Uranus is down here and Chiron is up here. And Chiron and Mercury are in a square to each other. This website isn't showing it, but they're in a square. There's a red line going there. And then Chiron is opposite Uranus. And together they make a T-square. It pulls all three of the archetypes together in a T-square. And what does that mean? So Mercury is the archetype of communication in the mind. And Uranus is the archetype of the rebel. The Uranus in Greco-Roman mythology was associated with Prometheus, or is associated now with Prometheus of Greco-Roman mythology, the rebel. You know, Prometheus was the Titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to the humans. The humans were living in darkness, and the gods were partying on Mount Olympus. Prometheus snuck up there, stole fire, gave it to the humans, and that's all really a metaphor for like kind of like forethought and inventiveness and ability to innovate, the human capacity for thinking ahead and innovating, and leaps of thought and eureka moments, and the ability to rebel against constraints and constrictions. That's very Uranian. And when Uranus is with Mercury, Mercury is associated with the mind, how we speak, how we think, how we communicate, how we correspond, even how we travel in short trips, like data, the transfer of data from one place to another in our head, a thought, you know, moving from one conclusion to another, or we are like a little packet of data driving to the other side of town. So like trips, data, transition of information, transit of information. And so when those two are together, we get that the thinking mind and the speaking have a very Uranian aspect to it. So they have a very this kind of aspect to it that's electric, it's inventive, it's Uranus is associated with the eccentric, the odd, the kind of the outlier. And when those two are together, we can speak in a way that is kind of different. We might want to talk about topics that are different from the norm. We might want to, you know, if there's some type of, you know, like a library or something where everybody's like, shh, you know, you got to keep it down, you got to keep it quiet. You know, Mercury, Uranus is like the rebel and talk. It's like, you know, I just want to keep on talking. I want to kind of like rebel against that constraint. And then Chiron up here is the archetype of the wounded healer, which is very kind of popular these days in the archetypal literature. As such, the archetypal basket of symbolism of Chiron spans a spectrum from the wounding, thing that is wounding, to a thing that is healing, and a thing that makes us kind of a agent of healing. And so when we have Chiron, Uranus, Mercury together, we can already see in Justin, like when he's speaking to us, he's able to kind of, in a very Uranian way, kind of range about in his thoughts, and also talk about that which is different. It's kind of, it's got like an electric kind of different quality to it, you know, talking about astral projection, talking about, you know, topics that are kind of Uranian, kind of like they're off the standard contemporary track. And then when we have Chiron there, the wounded healer, there can be a sense there around speaking, and that's something about the speaking quality. You know, there can at times be some type of wounding there, like maybe from if somebody was like critical of the way we spoke, or of our mind, or the way the mind worked, or something like that. And then similarly, on the other side of the spectrum of Chiron, the sense of healing and healer, and the sense of that actually through the Uranian Mercury, through the mind that has this ability to range into kind of revolutionary different territories, there's something healing there. There's something that's very healing there, both for oneself and probably for others too. And oftentimes, sometimes what you see with Mercury, Uranus too, and with Chiron is actually like humor, like an ability to be funny, an ability to kind of say the thing that is the least expected thing to say, which kind of throws people off. That's that Uranian kind of surprise energy there. And so anyways, that's the first one I want to touch on there. And then before we move on to the other aspects, I just want to check in with you, Justin, and just see, how this is landing with you so far. And
I mean, I think I think I think you hit the nail. I think you've hit the nail right on the head so far. I mean, certainly, you know, I think what's lined up exactly is, this path to being, different, which led me to trouble. But that was born into me. There wasn't a particular catalyzing event. It was just kind of, it was as if it was written in the stars.
Did anybody else see this too? So Uranus is associated with like excitement, basically, and thrill, and the Mercury is associated with like the trip, the trip, the travel, and Chiron is associated with the healing, and the Uranus is associated with Daedalus and Icarus in the Greco-Roman mythology, because it's a cautionary tale about Uranus, but it's also a tale that is honoring of Uranus too, because what happened with Icarus, and I believe Daedalus was his father, you guys please correct me if I'm wrong, but what they did is they constructed wings, right? So that humans could fly. And then the sun took the wings and he flew, but he flew too close to the sun because it was so thrilling, right? And then what happened was it melted the wax on the wings, and he came down. But the Uranian part of the story, I mean, it's all Uranian in the sense that it was excitement and flight. That's very Uranian, like the Wright brothers. At least one of the Wright brothers, I'm not remembering exactly which one, but I'm pretty sure had. I know they had Jupiter Uranus aspect, which is the aspect of the inventor and kind of like the celebration of flight, of leaping to a new level, a higher level, away from the constraints of reality. And when humans invented flight, it was a big leap away from the constraints of, because we were constrained to the ground before that, and then we could fly. And so this Uranian excitement and thrill, and how traveling, it's a short trip. It's just from the sky to the ground. It's kind of a mercurial trip. It's not like you're flying to another country where there's a different culture, not like a big trip. You're flying just like on a short trip, little mercurial trip, but it's really thrilling and exciting because you're like in the sky. And then there's a healing aspect there. You can kind of see how that part of his life really opened up. It kind of honored a part of his nature in a way that felt right for him, and as such was very healing. And so anybody else see that? So let's look at a couple other aspects here. So well, why don't we look at this one? We've got a Mars-Jupiter conjunction square to the moon, and then opposite the sun. So that's another T-square. It's another three-pronged hard aspect. It's not showing this prong in the computer, but it's what's called a T-square, just like with Chiron, Uranus, and Mercury. But in this one, we've got the sun opposite moon. So the sun has to do with our central sense of identity, the I, the me, my name. The moon is associated with that there is this equally as much a part of our identity that's relational. It's, the moon is associated, lunar archetype is of course associated with the mother, but it's also associated with the, it's associated with that part of our identity. It's relational. I'm the brother, sister of so-and-so, the son, daughter of so-and-so. I belong to such and such community. I have such and such emotional bonds. I have such and such emotional conditioning from childhood, such and such family background. It's all the emotional matrix of my identity. And as such, it's very much linked with like nurturance, how the style with which we receive and give nurturance, and also the style with which that we give and receive nutrition, because that's a very lunar thing, you know, like the initial stages of a human being receiving nurturance is through nutrition, you know, like feeding the baby. And so that's something that's associated with the symbolism of the moon as well. And then we've got it linked to the Mars Jupiter conjunction. Mars and Jupiter. Jupiter has to do with the abundance, the higher heights. The Jupiter, the largest planet, is associated with uplift, heights, expansiveness, abundance, superabundance. And then Mars is the archetype of forceful action, bravery. You know, Mars is the god of war. So on the spectrum of symbolism of Mars, it can be like on one end of the spectrum, challenging end, things like war, aggression, violence, anger. On the other side of the spectrum, it's things like bravery, action, assertiveness, you know, our pep, our kind of physical motivation, our competitive side, our athletic side. And so Mars with Jupiter, with the moon, I mean, with the sun, with the moon, we can see in the sense that the central identity, the I, the me, the name is linked up with the moon in some, thus far in Justin's life, in the sense that his identity is linked up with this kind of like hospitality industry of food, you know, like food service, you know, providing nutrition, you know, like providing nutrition through, you know, or providing nourishment and nurturing through food, basically. At the same time, though, we've got this Mars Jupiter conjunction, which, you know, people born with Mars Jupiter, there's an uplift when we have things aspected with Jupiter. It gives a kind of a buoyant lift and a success to it. And Mars is the bravery. And Mars is also the fight, and Jupiter is associated with high ideals. And so people born with Mars Jupiter, like Gandhi, you know, Gandhi was born with Mars Jupiter. We actually have a Mars Jupiter alignment in the sky right now that we'll probably look at before this is over. But Gandhi was born with Mars Jupiter, and you can see he was the fighter for the high ideals. Bruce Lee was born with Mars Jupiter. He's the celebrated warrior. You know, Jupiter lifts, it makes successful, it takes it up to the heights, it celebrates something. And Mars is that warrior energy, that brave energy. You know, Bruce Lee, he's like just almost like archetypal celebrated warrior type. And so we can see here with the Mars Jupiter an aspect to the moon and the sun, that when Justin really came into this community of people that were skydivers, it really felt like it honored for him something kind of core to his nature. And that's oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention the moon's associated with community, like where we feel we belong, the sense of emotional connecting, bonding, connecting with the social fabric, the bonding emotional fabric of humanity. And so community. And so there was a sense of connecting with this community that was like these brave people who have this kind of positive, bravery, swashbuckling sense that they can jump out of airplanes, you know, like they've got this, the heights of bravery, the literal heights, you know, like sky. And then the bravery is also buoyed up so that there's a sense of a positive outcome to this whole thing and a kind of a celebratory. You can even see it when Justin's talking. There's a sense of a kind of like a Jupiterian positive adventure kind of quality to it that is Mars. You know, it's got to be brave. Like, I mean, you, Justin, doing that are doing something that probably like 97% of the population wouldn't do, because it's so scary, you know. But so there's a sense of like the bravery and that combination with Jupiter, with the moon, and the connecting with the community there, and that helped him also find his identity. I just want to pause here because I want to check in with Justin, but I also saw something in the chat. Let me just, it's kind of hard to, what orbs are you using? Jason's asking. So this program is, I think it's maybe 10 degrees opposition, 8 degrees square. Though what you'll notice is common in archetypal astrology, probably other forms of astrology as well. You can sew together aspects. Like for instance, this leg of the T-square is not shown in this program because the sun is at 10 degrees of Leo and Mars and Jupiter are at the very beginning of Scorpio. So that's more than 10 degrees. That's like, wait, let's see here. No, so, okay. So yeah, that's, they would have to be, yeah. So that's like over, that's more than 8 degrees. So 8 degrees square, it's more than 8 degrees. But then they are an aspect to the moon, and the moon is an aspect to the sun. So the moon's a little earlier, it's at 6 degrees of Aquarius and the sun's at 11 degrees. So it's almost like when you're stepping across a stream and one rock is too far to get to, but you know, if you leap to another one, you get some momentum and you can get to that third one. So the same here, you know, if you have a square here and an opposition here, it ties together this side, which is a little out of orb. Same with the Uranus and Chiron and everything here. If you look, this is 22 degrees, 27 degrees, and 0 degrees. Let's see what people are saying. Because signs are not prioritized, there's no such thing as an out of sign aspect. No, the aspect will still be active. You know, if you just erased the signs, like you just cleared out the signs, you'd still have aspect. You know, like if it was a tight aspect, like a tight square, but it happened to be out of sign, it would still be a tight square. Though you'll notice if there a little bit of the signs can play a role. If, for instance, the sign that one of them is in is, like, say it's a trine and that's a little bit out of sign, it might not be quite as powerful as if they're in sign. But generally speaking, yes, you're right, Jason. Thank you for asking that question. Okay, Justin, returning to you. How does we just briefly touched upon Mars, Jupiter, square to the sun. I mean, yeah, square to the sun and the moon. How does that land with you?
Yeah, I think that all pretty much resonates. You know, I definitely found a like-minded community, and you know, this guy, and you know, found a deeper purpose with these people.
Yeah.
And you know, it's my people. It's where I was supposed to be, and has led me to you know, through that I met my fiance, who I'm here with now, and
Amazing.
just you know, it completely changed the you know, course correction in life.
Yeah, so let's look at some other aspects. Thank you for that. Let's look at some other aspects here, if we may. How's that sound, Justin?
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've got a kind of a wide Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and it's basically creating a kind of a triple. It's like a stellium right here between Saturn, Pluto, Mars, Jupiter. That's the 80s. Basically, he was born right before Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter got, was it right before? I guess it was right during when Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter became tight in the sky. And that was the last time that the same triple alignment as was in 2020 happened at that time in the early 80s. So that was the big talk of last year. You had Saturn, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto tightly together in 2020, and that was the That was basically the, sorry, the defining, that was one of the major defining characteristics for the 2020, you know, the sense of 2020, like this, there's this sense with Saturn, there's constraint. Pluto's Saturn's the archetype of constraint, constriction. Pluto is the archetype of, it's like the intensifier. Whatever it touches, it just intensifies with this kind of snake-like constrictive grip. It just like intensifies. It's the archetype of transformation and the elemental power of the will of life to evolve. And whatever it touches, it suffuses that thing with that elemental power, so that, you know, we have to evolve out of the challenge that's presented by that combination. And when Pluto and Saturn are together, there's this sense that the Saturnian boundaries and limitations of life become constricting on us. And then Jupiter's there as well, and it feels as if the abundant side of life also gets caught in this kind of trash compactor. It reminds me of the scene in Star Wars where they get stuck in this trash compactor. It's kind of constricting them. And so the that, you know, in 2020, that much was obvious. It was so obvious because it was like, oh, okay, the borders are closing. Everybody, not, it was, you know, the macrocosm and the microcosm were just so obviously accordioned and nestled within each other. It was like, we got to shut the borders, but also you got to shut the borders to your job. You got to shut the borders to your house. You got to shut the borders to your mouth, you know, like you got to, but yet you need space between people, like 6 feet. And so it was all this, you know, Saturn, Jupiter thing with like expansion and contraction and trying to, and even the economy was like, you know, suddenly these random sectors of the economy, like hand sanitizer, were just like booming, whereas like things like restaurants, which is so normal, were like collapsing. And so that triple combination in 2020 was actually there in the early 80s. And those of us that were alive and cognizant at that time remember that there was a very real threat of nuclear holocaust that was hanging out. It was specifically during those years that there was this thing that Russia and the United States both had their finger on the nuclear arsenal. And it was this sense of, you know, there was this talk of nuclear winter and all these things and nuclear holocaust. And I remember there were these shows that they would show on TV of, you know, mushroom clouds, and everybody was freaked out. And, you know, there was some type of thing about hide under your desk at school or something like that's going to help you if there's a nuclear blast or something like that. And so anyways, that energy was there too. And so you were born with that, energy, you know, you were born at that time. So a fascinating aspect of astrology, and archetypal astrology tends to focus on this, is that when you look at a birth chart, you're looking at this nestled symbolisms, that kind of these nestled concentric circles of symbolism. The first being that the birth chart is the chart of the moment of the birth of this person. So it describes, it's like a transit chart. It describes what the birth process was like for this person, okay? It also, though, describes the entire arc of the life of the person. So that's different scales, and it describes the nature of that person. So there's 3 kind of different scales there. So if we look at this one, you know, Justin was born during that last triple conjunction. And it was a time in which the, you know, there was that atmosphere in the air. Though when he was born, Mars was there in it. And it had also separated a bit, and they weren't really tightly together. And Mars was very tight with Jupiter. And so we can see in Justin's life the sense that the Saturn Pluto is the sense of, I mean, it's a deep combination, and it's a difficult combination because Saturn is associated with all the negating realities, or all the kind of heavy realities of existence, because existence needs heavy realities in order to mature itself, in order to temper itself and kind of forge its metal. And that includes judgments, the heaviness of judgment, of rejection. These are Saturnian things. Separation, um, negation. These are all Saturnian names. And then when you have Pluto there, it intensifies. It's an intensifier of those energies. And then there's Jupiter there as well. And so in the nuclear, that looming nuclear holocaust time of the early 80s, what it was Saturn showed up as fear and the sense of that there were kind of like these borders firming up between Russia and the United States, and also the rest of the world was being encouraged, like, oh, you come on our side, or no, you come on our side. It was like this firming up again of borders and this looming fear. And so that combination is an atmosphere that you were born into, Justin. And we can see how he in his life has actually exhibited the evolution of a human through those archetypes, because even when he was young, there was a sense that like a kind of depressive sense, a sense that of kind of like, and these are not the words that he used, but looking at the aspects of Saturn and Pluto, I'm going to guess it had to do with heaviness. That's Saturn Pluto thing, is like a sense of heaviness, a sense of reality being heavy. You know, that's the reality principle of Saturn getting intensified by Pluto. Saturn's associated with gravity, gravitas, and gravity, and Pluto intensifies that. Kind of like bearing a weight, a burden.
I say it's dense. It's dense. I always have a feeling of denseness, is how I put it.
Denseness, beautiful.
Dense.
Good. Thank you.
Dense.
Thank you. Yeah. So there's that sense. There's that sense of denseness. Also, Saturn and Pluto are an aspect of Venus, which is Venus is the archetype of the heart, of love, of what we value, of that which gives us pleasure, that which gives us the kind of the vibrations of harmony, which is why Venus is associated with friends and lovers, because, you know, we strike a common chord. That's why it's associated with things like music and painting, because there's a sense of like, you know, kind of this pleasurable sense of harmony, of notes, of colors, of things like that. So the heart, and this sense that that the constriction principle of Saturn and Pluto is there right with Venus, you know, the sense of like worth, the sense of love, worth, pleasure. And, you know, we can see this description of in the life of Justin, of this sense of like when he, I believe it was like going into junior high, there was this sense that that, you know, Justin's mom was kind of complaining like you're hanging out with the bad kids, but actually what Justin describes that is that he's the one who was doing the stuff that the other people followed. And that with Saturn and Pluto, there can oftentimes be a sense of the bad guy, because, you know, Saturn is judgment, heaviness, rejection, separation. Pluto intensifies it, can darken it. And the nuclear holocaust time, it was just a total projection fest. I mean, no nuclear bombs were launched, but projections were launched like all over the place. You know, the evil empire of Russia. Russia's the evil empire. Who knows what they were saying about the US? They were probably saying basically the evil empire in Russian, you know? And it was like projecting that what is in ourselves we feel is unacceptable onto the outside. You know, the outside, like the negative, the dark, the shadowy, the bad guy. And for Justin, it was the sense that actually the circles of friends, he was actually the one who was kind of the self-proclaimed, you know, like, I mean, bad influence, you know, that's kind of like what he was describing, like the bad influence. But it's Saturn, Pluto there with Mars and Jupiter. So there's this sense of like Mars and Jupiter. Mars is very much associated with action and bravery, and Jupiter is associated with the heights. So there's kind of a leadership quality there. So it's like the bad guy, but also there is some leadership quality there. Venus is like the friends, the love, the harmony. And so in a way, it kind of describes a story, and this can get into archetypal astrology as an illustration of a life, or as a story, mapping a story of a life. We can see how earlier in life, there was the sense of the heaviness of the Saturn Pluto, and the sense of the worthiness of Venus and the love being, you know, constrained by that Saturn Pluto, and then the sense of actually identifying with the being the bad influence, but actually being a leader in being a bad influence. And then it kind of ticked around and came to the point where the leader principle and the bravery principle, Mars Jupiter, gets linked up with the moon and the community and the sun, and it starts to be more about it kind of converts. It's like an alchemical conversion in which Justin actually ends up doing something that's kind of Saturn Pluto. You know, it's kind of dangerous, very dangerous, but it's Jupiter, it's Mars Jupiter, and it's like really brave. And that actually connected him to a community, the moon, you know, where he felt at home. He felt like his identity was honored there. So kind of does like it's almost like a tic-tac, like a hopscotch. You know, we start here, we go here, we go here, we go here. I don't know if that makes sense. Let me know in the chat. But there's, yeah, and then also, of course, we began talking about the Mercury Uranus with Chiron, and that's obviously a part of this excitement of thrill of jumping and perceiving the, you know, the rebel energy and you know, how that was healing to have the thrill of the leap into the sky. Justin, I just want to check in with you just to see, you know, how's.
I think you're firing on all cylinders, James Moran.
Awesome, brother. Awesome. We can also see actually earlier in his life how there was this kind of a transition. Like we talked about the Venus, Saturn, Pluto in like his junior high years, and how he was kind of a leader influence in the group of friends. And then we kind of leapt to later on when it's more like this is converted more to like, you know, dealing with danger, but being a very Mars brave, Jupiter kind of optimistic person, connecting with community, having that being a part of identity. But in between, there was a stage in which there was actually a social justice or like a criminal justice emphasis, or, you know, like a chapter, I guess you could say, or like you know, like a subsection of a chapter in his life, which was criminal justice, which is actually common with this. You know, it's common with this Saturn, Pluto, Mars, Jupiter, because Mars is like the fight and Jupiter is the ideals, the high ideals, like equality. And Saturn, Pluto is literally the walls of the constriction of the prison, you know, closing in on us. And that's the heavy reality of life that, you know, Saturn, Pluto is just reflective of the heavy realities of life, you know, things like death. Like we come in through a very narrow gateway and we go out through a very narrow gateway, and we can't really take anything with us. And those are Saturn, Pluto realities, you know. And then this sense of, you know, some people come in through a very negative gateway and then they just get locked into a very negative gateway. You know, they get into jail. And so there's that Mars Jupiter again, the fight, you know, the criminal justice. There's a couple other aspects here. We're kind of beginning to wind down a little bit, but we're probably going to go over just because, you know, I can tell we're in the heart of the reading. But I also want to bring in, I just want to touch on a couple of things before I get into the transits, which is more like honing in on this chapter in Justin's life. And the last couple of things I want to bring in is that with Neptune and the sun, there can be oftentimes a sense that the identity, the I, the me of the sun, and Neptune is associated with the infinite expanses of the ocean. Neptune is the god of the ocean, the infinite expanses of the dream realm, the imagination, the spirit realm, heaven. Neptune spiritualizes things. It also tends to dissolve things out and associate them with selflessness, selfless service. But it also makes things kind of amorphous and hard to pin down, hard to centralize. And the sun is oftentimes associated, not strictly, but oftentimes associated with the father in the birth chart. And I mean, I'd love to hear if this feels like a accurate reflection, Justin, but the description you gave of the father traveling a lot, we can see oftentimes with Sun, Neptune aspects there. Sun, again, being reflective, at least in our younger years, of the father energy, yang, influential energy in our lives. Doesn't necessarily have to be the father, could be another person or the mother too, but oftentimes associated with the father. And Neptune makes it kind of like, it's hard to pin down. It's hard to get, the figure can have kind of like a shine to them, like an elusive shine. I remember I gave a reading once for a woman whose father was a famous political dissonant poet in a like Eastern European country who got imprisoned for most of her life because of that. And she just had this sense of like, he was like this figure that was like, had this shine of idealism, and he did just historically, he did. And in the culture he did. And for her, he did. But also it's kind of hard to find him and pin him down in her life because, he was there, but yet he wasn't there. Anyways, I just wanted to just kind of touch on that and check in with you, Justin, and if any of that resonates with you.
Maybe maybe he and it was probably a matter of misunderstandings. It was probably a matter of misunderstandings and being on different pages because nowadays we're completely on the same. We're completely on the same page.
Cool.
If connected, but there was a disconnect. Then and he was concerned with work, and he was trying to change the world with what he was doing and the environment and politics and things like that.
Yeah,
we can connect on things like that early.
Yeah. So with the sun Neptune too, there can be this sense of, so the sun is a centralizing principle, just like the sun's the center of the solar system, and the sun reflects the centralizing identity inside ourselves. Like we organize our life around an I and a me and a name. And Neptune is associated with that which has no center, has no boundaries, the infinite planes. The center is everywhere and nowhere. And when you have Neptune with the sun, because the sun is centralized, but Neptune has no center, and the two get together, oftentimes there is a sense that the center is everywhere and nowhere. And so that kind of like the highest, or one of the highest manifestations of that combination is actually a sense that as I do for somebody else, I do for myself. Because the sense of central identity has this diffuseness to it. As I do for another, I do for me. And that's like a true selflessness. It can also be like a sense of sensing the divinity in the other, like the same divinity that stands at my center, which is actually just open, kind of openness, is the same divinity that's at the center of somebody else. And so it can give rise to a genuine sense of kind of spiritual service to others. And we can get that sense a bit, in the father, in the sense of like, wanting to save, the world and the environment. And then even in Justin, like in the very beginning, there was a sense of wanting to do something for others, like kind of wanting to do something for others, but not necessarily sell them a product, but like be of service. Is that an accurate reflection?
Yeah, that's completely accurate.
Yeah. So with that, why don't we transition to looking at the transits? Just close this down here for a second. So looking at the transits, it's always fun to see when somebody comes to an astrology reading, because you can kind of, once you get a sense of the storyline of the life as reflected in the birth chart, and then you can look at the transit chart, which is the beat and the rhythm of their unfolding. And then you can see that you can see the transits that are happening as they came to the reading. It's very interesting because you can kind of see like, oh, they've come to the reading to hear something like this, like something about this aspect of their life. It's very common that people come to astrology readings when their lives are really popping in some way, because it's part of the realization of the astrology reading is written in the transit chart itself. Like something big is happening, and having it in an astrology reading is kind of like a big electric thing. Sometimes though, the thing that's really happening in their life is a challenge, and that's like, that happens too when you give readings, and it can be and this is not the case in Justin's case, I'll say that straight away, but you know, if you start giving readings for people, you might have a situation in which you look at a chart and you realize that the next 5 years of their life is going to be the hardest 5 years of their practically their entire life. And in a way, it's good that they're getting an astrology reading, you know, because it's not like, hey, you know, this is bad, let's all get down and out. It's like, yo, look, this is the gift from God or from the universe or whatever that is saying, like, this is a tough time, and we know it's a tough time. We know the length of the time. We know it's not always going to be tough. We know there's fluctuations in there, and we know that, you know, these are the characters involved in the tough time, and this is where it's heading. We don't know exactly how it's going to pan out, but we know that it's wanting in general to go in this direction. It's wanting you to evolve in general in these ways. So that is not the case here. What the case here is that we've got a transit chart in which Justin's actually about to have his birthday, which is pretty cool, no? And he is having so in the sky, we have what's called a Uranus-Saturn square in the sky. So that means, like, if we were to take out this central birth chart, if you were to take it out and just have this outer circle, which is where the planets are now, you'd have what's called a transit chart. You'd have what's called a world transit chart. It just means what's up for the world right now. And what's up for the world right now, the biggest, maybe the most exact, big, bold stroke transit that's happening right now is the Uranus square, the Saturn square Uranus. Saturn, the archetype of constriction, constraint, limitation, law, authority. Uranus, the archetype of the rebel, the one that leaps and above the constraints, the electric one, the exciting one, but also the reckless one, the rebel, but the reckless one, the fickle one. And the two need each other. The two need each other, even though they're so different. And we can see it in the news these days all over the place. You know, it's like, it's been there for over a year, like over a year and a half, and it's got another, I think, a year and a half to go. It's a long transit, but it's the tightest now. We're right in the center of it, and it's the tightest now. We got a comment here. Uranus, the guy who jumps the fence, Saturn, yeah, right on. So yeah, the two are in a conversation, a very lively discussion together right now. I mean, we saw it, I think it was last year when things really started to heat up in the British royalty. It's a very Saturn Uranus thing, this old tradition, very Saturnian and kind of stodgy, if you don't mind me saying so, kind of like rigid old tradition. And then there's a Uranian young, you know, Harry and Markle, Meghan Markle, you know, kind of like these Uranian upstarts. And then it's like this kind of tension between the change and the new and the old and the tradition. We can see it in these kind of like innovative technological things that are actually causing disruption to infrastructures, you know, like innovative technological ransomware and hacking and all these Uranian actually advancements. They're advancements, but they're advancements that the Saturnian infrastructure of this country and probably other countries get kind of shaken up by, you know, like power grids going out and things like that. That's a very Saturn Uranus thing, because Saturn negates and Uranus is associated with the electric, you know, power grids going down. The building that collapsed in Miami, that's a kind of an exact example of the tension gone awry, because when you have structure and then the tension between freedom and structure becomes too much, you know, you just get a break. And you've been getting a lot of breaks. You'll probably start seeing breaks in the Olympics and the UFC, the mixed martial arts. There's been a lot of breaks recently. So anyways, it's that combination, Uranus and Saturn, Saturn and Uranus, they want to come to a new reconciliation between structure and maturity, Saturn, and rebelliousness and recklessness, Uranus. And for Justin, it's all on his natal sun. And the sun is our sense of identity, the I, the me, the sense of, just our central sense of identity. And so what we can sense there is that there's this desire to kind of break, to change, to kind of rebel against the old track, but actually the way that it goes is like the rebellion, the way that we want it to go is actually the rebellion is a maturing. It's a strange thing. It's actually rebelling by maturing. That's how Saturn and Uranus get together in a good way. And so with the sun, it's like the identity, we want to free up a side of the identity that's very much a part of your nature, Justin. That's Uranus. I want to free it up, like bring out the rebel energy, free up, but do it in a way that is more mature, Saturnian. So it comes up in odd ways, like committing to something, committing to committing to a job, committing to a marriage, committing to a home or a family, or committing to, a path or a practice or something like that, which is a mature thing that actually confines us, but we find that it actually liberates us. It liberates us. It actually liberates a side of our nature that is actually like very, very liberating, very exciting, but it's not a usual liberation. It's not like just a total all out liberation. It's one that comes from maturity. And as the sun in the sky goes over your natal sun, it's going to set that off. So the fact that you're here now in this reading is very much linked with the fact that this is whenever the sun goes over an aspect, it lights it up and it brings it kind of like, that's the time when the thing comes to a head. That's the time when the thing comes to its like fruition in a way. And so you're about to have that, the sun is going over your natal sun as the Uranus and Saturn are on your natal sun. So you have a couple other transit aspects here, but I just want to check in with you and just like, is anything that I'm saying resonating with like your situation currently?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Today, in fact, was just such a horrendous day at this job. I was thinking to myself, as soon as I get this next bit of work done, I need to really plow forward into finding something new. So you hit that on the head to the day, I think, and so yeah, I think that that resonates, and there's a lot of changes I'm trying to make these days.
Yeah,
a lot of changes I'm trying to make.
Yeah, so just to illustrate, like one of the advantages of a reading like this is that since we know the sun is going across your natal sun, it's going across the Saturn-Uranus aspect to your natal sun, we know that in the next week or so, as that happens, and then the sun will go across your ascendant. So over the next like 2 to 3 weeks is a time in which the Saturn-Uranus can be like a left turn energy, just like, if it's resisted, it can show up as the break, like we don't want the break, like the broken, some object breaks, some bone breaks, some thing breaks, but usually that happens in the sense of like a resisting of this energy. And like, if there's a sense of going with it, there can be a sense like, oh, there is kind of a break and there is kind of a left turn that is imminent in this window of time. But it's one that we know is good. It's in the service of a maturing aspect, Saturn, and a freeing aspect, Uranus. So there is actually a positive, there is a method to the madness. There is a kind of like an orchestration to this whole thing. Even when we have sudden left turns, sometimes like if we look like, oh, okay, that is not an accident. It's actually what needs to happen now. That's another way that the universe manifests energy. Sometimes it manifests change in smooth ways, abrupt ways, heavy ways, light ways, and sometimes sudden herky jerks, And so, yeah, so that's something to be aware of. Again, you're coming into a reading now, right before your birthday, right before the sun's going over that aspect in your chart. So it's great. It's nice. This is a little boon here to help to illustrate that, as you go into this time, it's almost like it's almost like mindfulness meditation. I call it archetypal mindfulness. Like, we have the reading, we know what energies are up. So we just want to keep our ears open. We just want to keep our eyes peeled. We just want to kind of like be present and aware of the archetypes in action, and be aware where an abrupt change needs to happen. That's something that's simultaneously freeing and maturing. And it might be a little bit scary, but it is the right thing. It is kind of the right dance move at the moment. But we don't necessarily even know what it is, even if we think we know what it is. We just want to, as the next week unfolds, particularly, just stay really open, and just kind of see how it unfolds. And then when you catch it, you can just be like, oh, I see you, Uranus. I see you, Saturn. I see, I see how you're kind of doing your thing. And so yeah, so there's that. And then we'll look at one other transit. We'll begin to wind down, because I know folks, let me check here who's with us. Okay, so we still got a number of people with us. So we'll begin to wind down. I'll just bring in another couple aspects here, and then we'll open up briefly for questions. So again, if you were to remove this chart in the center, you'd see that Mars and Jupiter are opposite each other. And Mars and Jupiter are the combination that actually Justin was born with. This is Mars and Jupiter. And then they're opposite each other here. And that's, we talked about that. Gandhi, right? Mars, Jupiter. Bruce Lee, Mars, Jupiter. And so right now it's there in the sky, like the fight for the ideals, the high ideals, Jupiter. And also the kind of the brave, the swashbuckling bravery, the optimistic bravery, the take the leap off the edge and just know everything's going to be all right. Mars, Jupiter, skydiving. And then there's a Mars, Jupiter opposition in the sky, but this is actually right on Justin's natal Uranus, which is exciting because that's like a take a leap off it's almost like skydiving, take a leap off the precipice with a positive attitude. But since Uranus is there, when you get Uranus and Jupiter together, there tends to be this kind of like, it's almost like, let me take a leap, have a positive attitude, and just take a leap off. Somebody was bringing up, somebody was bringing up this scene recently with me from Indiana Jones, one of the Indiana Jones, where he has to like walk across some chasm, and he just has to take a leap. And it looks like there's a chasm, but it's just like, but there's actually a bridge that's like painted into the background, so you can't see it. So he like steps on a solid ground. But the difference here, because it's this a Mars Jupiter opposition in aspect to natal Uranus, would be like, instead of taking a leap and finding solid ground, it would be like taking a leap and then finding suddenly you have wings and you start to fly. It's kind of like the sense of a leap, like a real quantum leap. Again, Jupiter and Uranus is the combination that's in one of the Wright brothers charts. That's that leap. They invented flight. Like Jupiter is the expansive optimisticness, and Uranus is the rebel, the rebel eureka moment, and there's like this loft, and suddenly they were in flight. So that's a very positive transit. It's exciting, and it's lined up over the same period of days as the sun transit. So you, my friend, came to a reading right as you're heading into a very exciting time, like literally over the next week or so. So you got my support on that, and I think you got the support of everybody on the call, I'm going to guess. So yeah, so what I can just keep going on and on because this is what I do and I love it. But I'm not going to, because we don't have the full 2 hours that we normally do. So I'm actually going to check in with Justin and see how this is landing, and then we'll open up for questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. There's a couple things you said, really resonated, and gives me hope for positive change. Um, so I find that every time I feel like in life you get to a point you're like, this is good, like everything's going smooth, you know a new curveball is thrown in, and there's more work to do, and sometimes it feels like it's just never ending work. It's just never ending work. But at the end of the day, it's all a matter of perception. We can be bothered by the endless work, or we can use it as an opportunity.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, and particularly you can even hear in your voice like the Saturn aspect to your natal sun and moon, because you were born during a full moon. So the Saturn aspect on it can be a particular inflection of work, like the sense that there's a lot of work going on. But the Uranus aspect to your natal sun and moon is pointing towards that there's some type of flip that wants to happen, in which the Saturn aspect gets manifested as either working or like working or separating or differentiating, working as a kind of a way to differentiate yourself or autonomizing yourself or something like that. So it's still hard work, but there begins to be let in like a freedom quality, so that through hard work there's a new exciting opening that happens now where there wasn't freedom before, and it actually is freeing up something that's essential to your nature. And sometimes that can even be something that we forgot was even something that was essential to our nature, like, or we even never knew it. I remember I had Uranus transiting my sun in a square like you have. And I remember like I had aspects of my nature come out and are honored. And I was like, I used to like doing that when I was a kid. And I was like, I didn't even remember that I like doing that, you know? And I was like, that's so cool. Like, totally, like this orchestration of life in the universe just doesn't forget these parts of ourselves that are like true, genuine, authentic parts of our nature, because they're true, genuine, authentic parts of life itself. If it's part of your nature, it's part of life itself. And no matter if they get buried or what, they're still there. Life wants that which is genuine to be part of the play. And so yeah.
Well, I'll just mention brief. So two nights ago, I'm doing this meditation before bed, and the moment I close my eyes, it's already opened up back there, and there's this picnic, and all of these kind of people are running around, and I'm like, well, it took no effort. It was just, it was just there, and all these people, and I get this feeling that, oh, these are aspects of myself, and I kind of put the question out there. I'm like, oh, is this, uh, you know, these are different personality facets that I'm seeing, and then at that point, everybody kind of turns and waves, and there was 20 people at a picnic, and they all wave, indicating that yes, this is correct. We're different aspects of your of the whole, and uh, so hopefully we can bring hopefully we can bring in the most positive ones. There's some fickle characters in there for sure, but there's also some really good ones.
Yeah, man. Well, everything has a role, man. At least in my mind, even the parts of ourselves or the parts of others or other people in society, everybody, oftentimes things seem like a negative thing when they don't have the right arena,
Mhm.
Like I oftentimes use the example of this little dancer girl that's in this video by this singer named Sia, and she's like dancing like crazy, and she's like only 11 years old. And I'm like, you take that girl and put her in a classroom at a desk and try and make her just, do whatever, like schoolwork. She would probably maybe be like a hellion, but like you put her in this music video and she's like one of the best dancers alive today. You know what I mean? It's like, so everything has its right arena, it's like, to my mind at least. So, Justin, my brother, thank you. And I'm so excited for you over the coming days. There's interesting things afoot. It's a gauntlet to be walked, but you're a brave soul. And, on the other side is a maturity and a freedom that comes from that, that dialing in of that whatever Saturnian aspect it's going to end up being. And it's joy. It's an honor to be here with everybody. I want to open it up briefly just before we totally close out for questions. Anybody has questions, you can type it into the chat. You can, turn on your mic, whatever. Questions for me, question for Justin.
I have a question for Justin.
Yeah.
I guess that was one thing that struck me about your part in regards to the little girl in the same music video. I was wondering if you think maybe the troublemaking tendencies in school came from being bored or feeling cynical about your environment, perhaps. That aside, wondering if you ever jumped out of a plane before. So I don't know what it's like. I imagine you're not really thinking about anything when you do that. If there's anything going on in your mind at all when you jump the plane.
So you're breaking up a little. The first part, am I hearing you correct? You were saying that there like wasn't much focus in this, in school, but you're wondering wondering like kind of what's going through my mind, in the door of the airplane. Am I hearing that correct?
There were not necessarily connected, but maybe I was like, yeah, I was just wondering if you were bored in school, because clearly you have a penchant and interest in learning things. So I was wondering if you were bored. And then also wondering.
Sorry, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. And also if if there is a kind of if they're thinking about things too much, or if there's some kind of liberation that you find in jumping out of a plane, like if there's like a relief there, other than just I mean, obviously be liberating, but I mean like from your like.
Yes, 100% right. There was, I think there was maybe a boredom with the material, and I didn't have the maturity to see the purpose in some of it. It's just like, oh, what do I, what am I ever going to need that for? Well, you just don't necessarily realize it. Now I choose what I like to study, so that does make it easier for that. In terms of the skydiving, something in it, just in addition to the adrenaline, which is great, the community, which is great. There, in the early recovery especially, there is a laser focusing that happens, when you're doing it. Everything else goes away. You have no option but to concentrate on the task at hand, and nothing else matters. So from the time that you leave the door until the time that you get on the ground, you don't have time to worry about what's going wrong, what's sad, what's bad, what's anything else. It's simply the task at hand, and you know, a kind of a pure joy. And it's like a pure joy about it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. And thank you so much, James. Incredible as always.
Alexis, great to see you. Thank you so much for coming. Yes, excellent. All right, any final questions here as we wind down? Yes. Yes, no, maybe so. Okay. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for being here with us. And Justin, thank you so much for being a brave soul that you are and taking the leap into the stars. And you're just the man to take the leap, my friend. And just being real with all your truth and all your Saturn, bringing it, honesty, and also your kind of electric perspective, the Uranian. Awesome, man. So this is going to be recorded. This will be up on YouTube very soon, and I will send you the replay. And yes, happy early birthday to Justin. And again, thank you all, everybody, for spending the time with us. Time and attention are a commodity these days. So thank you for being with us. All right,
Thanks,
everybody.
James.
All right, brother.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.